So we're going to begin just by situating a little bit the two vintages, 17 and 16. And then I'll be giving the word to Manuel Marchetti of Marcarini, who will be the first producer, and he will present the estate for about 10 minutes. This is true for each producer. Then we'll go through the tasting of the wines. That'll be another 10 minutes for each producer. And as the producer speaks and as he comments, I might intervene and either ask something or reminisce about something so as to make this more interesting and hopefully more fun for everybody while you're enjoying the great wines of these three estates. So the first thing is to just talk a little bit about the vintages so we're all on the same page and we all know a little bit about them. You know, when it comes to vintages, it's always difficult because people tend to generalize, and you understand why that happens, because it's so difficult sometimes to talk about all the nuances. But in fact, in wine, the nuances are important. And so some years, you know, get labeled as hot years, others cold years or rainy years, but it really isn't quite like that. You know, vintage charts, as useful as they may be, are limited by definition, because you can't say, you know, what the vintage was like in Bordeaux, because Bordeaux is huge, and what happens in Saint-Estèphe is totally different from Pomerol. And it's the same thing in Barolo. You know, things that might be going on in Lamora may not be at all what they're seeing in Serralunga. You know, Barolo and Barbaresco are very close, and even in Barolo and Barbaresco, vintages are different. So 2017 is a vintage that has been characterized as hot. And although that is partly true, there is some distinctions that need to be made. So 2017 is one of the so-called hot and droughty years because rainfall was less than it normally is. But it is a vintage that had positive characteristics compared to truly hot vintages, like, for example, 2003. 2017 actually began with a slightly rainy spring. It was a normal winter, a warm winter, then a slightly rainy spring and above average temperatures. And this got the growth cycle to start up faster. And it really stayed an early growth cycle really the rest of the year. And the harvest happened throughout the area earlier than previous years. In some areas, 1-2 weeks earlier than usual. But the key thing is that 17 also was thought of as a difficult year because of April frost episodes. And again, that is something that will often give a vintage a bad reputation, because everybody says, oh my gosh, it hailed, everybody got damaged, the wines aren't very good. But that's not true, because the hail hits in sporadic areas. And in fact, in Barolo, the hail was not so much a problem. Our friends in Barbaresco, for example, in the town of Neve, had huge problems because there the hail really did do a lot of damage. But in Barolo, the damage was not anywhere near as bad as I've read in many places. So, and after April, beginning in May, the temperatures rose and were quite warm, and it stayed that way throughout the rest of the year. The important thing about 2017, and this is again why I stress that when it comes to vintage charts, you have to be careful. In 2017, like in 2015, it cooled down at the end of August, beginning of September. And that's very important because there were huge diurnal temperature shifts. And that's very important because when you have cooler nights, that allows for the preservation of aromatic molecules, and you end up making much more perfumed wines than you would in a truly hot year. 2003 was a very hot year in the true sense of the word, because it was hot during the day and it was hot at night. And this is not the case with 2017, nor in 2015, both of which have a reputation for being very hot years. So 2017 is a much better year than people generally give it credit for. 2016 is instead, by all accounts, and my belief too, one of the greatest Barolo vintages of all time. I think when we talk about the great Barolo vintages, you can go back to 47, 71, 78, 82, 89, 90, 96, 2000, 99, 2001, and so on and so forth. And certainly 2016 is one of the greatest Barolo vintages of all time. And everything went well in 2016. It actually began as a late spring, and the season dragged on. So harvest occurred a little later than usual. But it was just basically a year of amazing weather. When you wanted rain, it rained. When you wanted sun, it had sun. The wines are wines of extreme power, yet perfume. And really, I mean, if there was any problem with 16, maybe that it was a generous year. So producers who maybe didn't watch their yields might have made less structured wines, but that's not the problem with these producers. The three we have today are really amongst the best Barolo producers there are. And so really 2016 are really the wines where you can just buy without a problem, cellar them because they're going to age extremely well. And so 17 and 16 represent two different vintages. Both have their charm. 17, a year of fleshier, riper wines, but with good freshness. 16, more classic wines, not as pleasing at first. They need a little time to develop, but they will develop gracefully and slowly over the years. So two very fine vintages, two very different vintages, and two vintages that I like. I didn't like 2003, but I like both these vintages very much. And we're going to now let Manuel talk about his estate, the Marcarini estate, one of the more historic estates in Barolo. You all know that beautiful golden label. It's iconic. And the Marcarini estate really has a lot of feathers to its cap and some very important facts. And I'm going to let Manuel tell you a little bit about them, and then maybe I'll just butt in from time to time. Ciao, Manuel. Vai pure.
Ciao, Indian. Thank you very much. Hello and greetings to everyone. Well, it is for me a big pleasure to meet you all, even if this happens in a new way. In fact, I would love to be personally with you, as I have always done. I've traveled and enjoyed this event so many times, and I hope and believe that this will be possible soon again. So going into the winery, Marcarini is the name of a family that has dedicated itself to wine since the second half of the 1800s. The company does not have a real date of foundation, as initially the vineyards owned in the Brunate area in Lamora were already cultivated by their ancestors. The first Marcarini generation that began to vinify Nebbiolo grapes from Barolo was General Sebastiano Marcarini, shortly after the unification of Italy in 1861. He was the tutor of the king's son and produced the wine that was mainly brought to court for parties and consumed in the family with friends. His grandson, notary Giuseppe Marcarini, began to bottle and market the wine with the gold color label, as Jan said before, that has distinguished our bottles of Barolo since 1958 vintage. Anna Marcarini, daughter of the notary, with her husband, the lawyer Giovanni Bava, continued the business by bringing additional vineyards to the family. In fact, the other MGA we produce, La Serra, arrived during that period. In the meantime, the company has grown, and Luisa Bava, my wife, with me, were called to take care of it in 1990. Our generation was the first to live only with the proceeds of the farm. Today, our three children are an active part and represent the future of passion for wine, thus being the sixth generation. As you can see from the Google map, our winery is in Lamora, in the northwest side of Barolo. And very close, you can see our vineyards. Here is the map, and you can see the Barolo Brunate and the Barolo La Serra. Brunate is marked with green, and La Serra is marked with purple. The other blue one that is marked with blue, I will tell you later. But anyway, our company now has 62 acres, 47 acres under vines, and we produce grapes typical of Piedmont: Dolcetto, Barbera, White Moscato, Arnese, and Nebbiolo. However, the most important part remains Nebbiolo, counting of about 20 acres dedicated to the production of Barolo. We have two historical MGAs, or crus, as it was used to say before, both located in Lamora, which are Brunate and La Serra. We have 11 acres in Brunate and almost 10 acres in La Serra. This gives us the potential to produce around 54,000 bottles of Barolo, out of a total production of the winery of around 120,000 bottles. Since 2015, we have started a project to improve the quality of our Barolo Brunate and La Serra. It all started after a question of my children. Can we improve the quality of our Barolos? Question that led me to assume that they wanted to change the traditional style that has always characterized our company. Having confirmed that they did not intend to change the style, but only wanted to know if it was possible to improve the wines, which with my great satisfaction made me to reply that certainly it is possible. To improve the wine, firstly, we have to start in the vineyard, as everyone. We have to improve the quality of the grapes. To do this, we decided to select the best grapes to be used for the production of the Barolo Brunate and of the Barolo La Serra, respectively, by choosing them from some plots on some positions where they already knew from experience being particularly special. Obviously, this led to a reduction in the number of bottles produced of each respective single vineyard. Today, about 10,000 bottles are produced of each cru, Brunate and La Serra. It was natural for us to think about a new Barolo using the remaining grapes from both Brunate and La Serra together, with what we can see in the map marked with blue. So you can see the three, all our plots are there, and all are facing into the south. So we introduced the new Barolo del Comune di Lamora, and now is part of our production. I would like to briefly talk about the three crus, Brunate, La Serra, and Lamora, and the vineyards are exposed, as you can see in the map, in the southern slope of hill of Lamora. Regarding Brunate, it's a historical single vineyard. You can find written traces of using this name since the 1300s, when the high vocation of this plot to produce excellent grapes was well known. Brunate has an altitude of about 980 feet and has an area of about 69 acres. Of course, today this was established and it was a little bit increased respect to the original Brunate. But anyway, mainly it is the same as it used to be. So 69 acres in total, with soil made up of fossil marls, with prevalence of limestone, clay, and with a characteristic prevalence in magnesium. The result is a full-bodied wine with great sweet tannins that allow the wine to age very well. La Serra is another historical vineyard located just above the Brunate. The elevation is around 1,250 feet. It has a different microclimate from the Brunate, and it is fresher and more ventilated. And the result makes La Serra to be an elegant wine with floral aromas. The total surface of Lamora today is 42 acres and has the same soil type of Brunate. Here, La Serra, in terms of dimension, has increased a little bit, because in the original part was only facing south, and today is facing south and southeast. But this is part of the games. I mean, our vineyards are facing south anyway. And the Barolo from the village of Lamora is produced from the grapes of the previous two single vineyards and makes a beautiful wine that show all the characteristics of the wines that are produced in Lamora area. The result is a wine that makes elegance its strengths and reaches the peak of its evolution in shorter periods, showing itself to be easier to approach and more enjoyable even at a young age. So today we will be tasting the 3 MGAs from Lamora, La Serra, and Brunate. But please take note that the vintage of Brunate is 2016 and not 2017 as the 2 others. The reason of this later release of the wine is because we want to give a Brunate wine that can be more expressive when it arrives to your table. And an extra year of bottling aging contributes to achieve this quality. So now it's time to let the wines to speak. And we start to taste the Barolo from Comuna di Lamora 2017. Color is its characteristic red garnet color. It's not a very, very deep as some other Barolos, because our Barolos has a long maceration, and Barolos from Lamora, they also do not have intense dark colors, but having a long maceration period to the Barolo, we have a positive thing and a negative thing. The positive thing is that our color remains like this for many, many, many years. So during the years, you will not see the color to change very much. The bad thing is that we do not have some beautiful dark and intense colors as other wines, and especially some years ago were so popular. So this is what I think in the color. And going to the nose, it is the typical perfumes of the Barolo from Lamora. So the flowers, dry leaves, petals, roses, violets, and this is some spicy notes. This makes me remain some of the sage, and it's these kinds of aromas. Very open right now, at least in my glass, and beautiful to smell right now. In the mouth, it is a wine that, of course, it has a good structure of tannin, but it's not as deep and intense as the two crus. These are a little bit more softer, are less aggressive than the Brunate and La Serra, and if it can be drinkable right now. This wine can be drinkable right now easily. I mean, if you have some food, a little steak or something, a brasato, and you will enjoy this wine very much. And this is the first wine that of the 3. Now we go to the second, same color as the one before, so the red garnet color. In the nose here, you find, of course, all the wines come from Lamora, so most of the characteristics are the same. But here you have a focus and has deeper and more intense, and it's more concentrated on some characteristic of Lamora. Here you have the flowers. The rose petals are really evident, and the flowers are very, very, very present in this wine. The roses and the violets, I feel the violets, some mountain flowers as well. And here it's a wine that has less of the spiciness respect to Lamora. In the mouth, a wine that is already pretty much open. In fact, La Serra usually opens sooner than Brunate, and in this case is pretty much enjoyable. 2017 vintage, as Ian said, is a vintage that has big structure but sweet tannins. It's very approachable. I like it very much. I think La Serra is expressing itself very, very, very well. The tannins are not are more evident and stronger, more present respect to Lamora, but they are not aggressive or sharp at any point. So it's a beautiful wine, and this wine can age. I have drank recently some old vintages of La Serra, and I always thought that La Serra didn't age as well as Brunate, but it's not true. La Serra aged in a beautiful, beautiful way as Brunate does. So, of course, it maintains more the florality, more the elegance, more the Burgundian maybe style, if you want to compare to French wines. But it is a wine that has this characteristic. It's very nice. And going to Brunate 2016, of course, here we have a different vintage. And this, of course, it's important. But what I can feel right now is finally, my Brunate is open as my 2017 vintages. So today we are having a year later wine, but that is speaking the same language and the same way and expressing itself in the same way as the other two more recent harvests. So the nose here is much more spicy. Here we have ethereal aromas, you have the mentholated or balsamic aromas, you have eucalyptus, you have some incense, you have some, yes, the licorice start coming out. And this is the characteristic of Brunate that is right now present. During the evolution, you will start noting more the presence of the tobacco or the tar, the leather and chocolate, which makes a wine, together with the spiciness, a unique wine. I think Brunate is a unique wine out of all the crus of Barolo. And in tasting it right now, you have the quantity of tannin apparently is much stronger and much larger than in the two others. The reality is different because if you analyze chemically the wines, the quantity of tannins is the same, but here what you feel is totally different. Here you have the tannins that takes and that hits you the mid palate in the top of your palate, and it is a round sensation of a big wine, and all well balanced in my opinion. So I hope you are tasting these wines and you agree with what I think and what I have found from my bottles today. I know you have smaller bottles and for the samples. I hope it's a great idea, I think, to do this with the smaller samples, but I hope they are good. I mean, this could be interesting to know for the future if the COVID continues, but I prefer bringing the large bottles and pouring it by myself. And this is all. If you have any other questions, I thank you for your attention. Okay, Ian.
So, no, I think that's great. Thank you, Manuel. It was very clear, I think. It was a very good presentation because you really managed to convey the differences between the vines. I think just to help put the wines and the crus more in perspective for all the people who are listening to us, you know, some things you obviously can't say because you have to be modest, but I can probably help you out here. I think the first thing to say is it needs to be clear to people, Brunate is really one of the most important crus, not just of Barolo, but of Italy. We're talking about one of the 5 best crus of Barolo. That's not to offend anybody else. It's a remarkably important cru. To help you understand, throughout the years when I've gone to talk to producers, I often ask them, which is the one cru you would like to make wine from in Barolo if you were lucky enough to own a vineyard? If somebody gave you all the money in the world that you could buy one vineyard in Barolo, which cru would it be? And more often than not, the answer is always Brunate. Some very, very, very important Barolo producers who do not make Brunate would love to make Brunate. So that already helps you put things into perspective. The other thing about Brunate, so you're really talking about a grand cru in the real sense of the word. It's also a particular cru because even though it is a Lamora cru, a very small piece is in Barolo, but it's a very different piece, both in altitude and geology. So it's a much lower lying piece as opposed to Brunate, which actually goes pretty up high, and the soil is also different. So when we talk about Brunate, we really refer to the piece in Lamora. And it's an amphitheater. So Brunate is historically a very warm site. In fact, this is one of the reasons why it was always coveted, why it was always so highly valued, because before climate change arrived, what we looked for were the places where the snow would melt first.
Yes.
And in fact, in Brunate, it really does melt fast. So the other thing about Brunate, therefore, is, as Manuel was saying, it's a wine where, even though there is the typical Lamora grace, it is certainly a more powerful Lamora wine than others, you know. And this is very evident when you compare it to La Serra. One of the things I've enjoyed the most over my years in wine is comparing Marcarini's wines from those two vineyards in the same vintage, because it really is a masterclass in the differences of terroir expression through the Nebbiolo grape. La Serra and Brunate, even though they're actually very close to each other, are two vineyards that give radically different wines. And you really pick up the differences between site with Marcarini's wines, because he uses the same winemaking, and it's a very traditional would be one way of describing it. I prefer the term classic. These are very classic Barolos that develop slowly and age gracefully. I always tell people, if you're lucky and you can find them, the old Marcarini wines from the 60s or 1971 are really fantastic wines. La Serra is a very different site from Brunate. For one thing, if you just take a walk in La Serra, you realize right away it's windier. It's a site that has ventilation. If it's a cool day, you actually need a jacket, because the wind is actually pretty. It's a well ventilated site. I mean, it's not windy. It's not as if you need to create revolving doors like they did in Chicago, but it is certainly a well ventilated and a cooler site. It's also a high site, right? It's also an altitude. La Serra goes anywhere from 370 to 450 meters above sea level. So it's you got the combination of the high altitude and the ventilation, and that really does a number on the grapes and on the wine. So the La Serra wines, I found, and Manuel, if you don't agree, correct me, but I've always found that the La Serra wines, besides the florality, while Brunate is more about fruit, there's a certain steeliness to the La Serra wines, a certain steeliness to its tannin, to its architectural framework. They're wines that have a certain austerity to them that allows them to develop very, very well. So they're not in-your-face fruity, but actually a bit more reserved, and they require time to really develop nicely. I love La Serra wines, and I think that again, if you're interested in the different expressions of Nebbiolo, and in Barolo, I mean, it's one of the greatest things about Barolo. The La Serra and the Brunate wines of Marcarini really allow you to understand the differences that are present in the wines even of Lamora, which we say are graceful and feminine and elegant, which they are, but in fact, there's very big differences between the various crus or MGAs.
Yeah, I agree, Ian.
Okay, man?
Yes, totally agree.
So,
and this is also why our ancestors, I mean, started designating the single vineyards on the label. In fact, in the past, there were no many people that designate the single vineyards. And maybe copying the French people, I don't know, but this was evident to our ancestors. And they start writing in the labels. I have some bottles that are from 1935, 1936. And actually, in those bottles, it was even written Brinate and not Brunate as today. And after the Second World War, because of Mussolini, putting the names in Italian, it was changed into Brunate. But we used them, and they were already recognized since that time. So I understand. I agree with you that it's a special plot, a special part of the vineyards.
Thank you very much, Manuel. Thank you very much, Manuel. We're now going to move on to the next producer, which is the estate is Einaudi. The producer is Matteo Sardagna Einaudi. And Matteo is with us, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his estate, and then he's going to guide us through the wines. And I'll be glad to comment afterwards. I love this estate. By the way, I shouldn't mention this because we're on a Barolo kick, but it's necessary. Einaudi and Marcarini make really fantastic dolcetto wines. So really, long live Nebbiolo, long live Barolo. But really, I point out how just fantastic the dolcetto wines of these two producers are. Matteo.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you to join us, me, the winery. Thank you to Ian, thank you to Manuel that already spoke, and joined Manuel in saying that it will be a pleasure next time to see each other directly, and not with this beautiful device that can give this opportunity. So our story started with my great-grandfather, Luigi Einaudi, that was a very well-known man because he became the first president of the Republic after the Second World War. But he started born in this area, Carru, Togliani. The mother was from Togliani. Togliani is a village just 5 kilometers, around 5 kilometers from the area of Barolo, south from Barolo, specializing in the Dolcetto variety. So he started in 1897 producing, and where is it the period, the beginning of the 2000th century, in the period where everybody was escaping from the area, from the vineyards, because there was the phylloxera, and he make a challenge and he start buying vineyards in this area of Dolcetto, introducing also new techniques. He was an innovator. And so for the first 50 years of the winery, we just produced Dolcetto mostly. After the Second World War, Luigi Einaudi bought a plot in Barolo village in the area of Terlo. That is our more historical plot where we produce Barolo. Now we produce Barolo Costa Grimaldi plot, not only, also the Barolo Ludo, our Barolo village, they say the French. And so when Luigi Einaudi passed away in 1961, the property, the estate was just 26 hectares in vineyards. Now the picture is different. We have 65 hectares under vineyards, divided between Dogliani, Barolo, and Neve, Barbaresco area. There was many changes in the last year, in the last few years. In particular, I want to point out a date that is 2016. 2016 was a date of many changes. It was a date where there was very sad things, news, because passed away our enologist, Lorenzo Einaudi, that for 28 years stayed with us. But in the same time was the date of Renaissance, I can say, because there was a new energy, and there was a big decision coming from my team. I decided to not hire any other enologist to start the wine for myself. And so I consider that date important because it was the date where I started making the wine as I want, exactly tailor-made for my person. And I am very, for this reason, I'm very proud and happy of the wine that are coming from 16. There was many changing, and also there was some travel that I did in Burgundy in particular, where I have a new inputs for vinification and other ideas. It was also the date where I started making some acquisition. And in particular, 16 was the date where and see the acquisition of Bussia. It was a beautiful plot in Bussia d'Ardi, almost 5 hectares, so big plot. That is starting now to produce. All the production is limited, might will be bigger because I replaced some vineyards. 17 seed acquisition of Monvigliero, 19 Villero, and also Barbaresco. So I will say that there was a nice period, also because of my love for Nebbiolo that are growing in the last 20 years. I started working for 20 years ago. And to start making great wines, to have your identity needs time. And I think now I'm become with clear idea where I want to go with the wine. After this acquisition, starting from 16, I also decided to do a new vinification area to carry in the best way the new crew and also the new idea that came from on the one. So all the new vinification area was made in concrete vats that was made sized, tailor-made for each plot of vineyards inside of each crew. So Canubi, we have different age of plantation, and we have different vats to divide in a better way. So now we are more precise and more tailor-made device to carry out this. And also the process change. Now we have a very low Gandhi style, no violence, so a very smooth process, very smooth process in all the steps. So from the beginning, from when we pick up to the press machine, so everything is done in a very smooth way, and the result are wines that are much more integrated, where tannins and acidity are fused, are merged in a better way. So you have a more harmonic and balanced wine. Now we can go directly on the map. If you wanna, you can go and see where we are in Dogliani. So you can see now that Dogliani is just south from the area of Barolo. And now there we're just producing Dolcetto, Nebbiolo, and going up, our property is divided between Barolo village. So we're moving from Lamora to form Manuel. Now we're going to Barolo and then to Monforte. Barolo, we have 2 plots. The original plots where we started producing Barolo is Terlo. Terlo is a little bit higher in altitude than Canubi. We are around 1,200 feet altitude, and the composition of the soil is a plot of almost 5 hectares, a little bit less than 5 hectares. And the composition is a clay and calcareous soil. Usually we have it's a kind of the characteristic of this soil makes Barolo with a classic and a little bit more solid tannins than Canubi, the other plot that we have, very famous Canubi. It was an acquisition made in 1996 from the Gancha family at 2.3 hectares, but it produces around 10,000 bottles. Canubi is a very it's so historical, and many of you knows about Canubi, but is the original place where Barolo born in 1750 something, I don't remember exactly, but more than 200 years ago. So once the bottle was called just Canubi, neither Barolo in the beginning. It was the original place. In that position, we have a very unique soil where we have a mix between the 2 main geological areas, the Tortonian and Helvetian, and also this Marne of the Sant'Agata, called, with a percentage of sandy soil very high. So usually the average in the Barolo area is 12–13%. Here we have 30% in sandy soil. So we have a beautiful natural draining that makes a high standard quality every year, because the ripening is very nice every year. And you have wine with characteristics. We are talking about the wine after. Now we are moving to Bussia. Bussia, we have several positions, in particular the Dardi, and the north part we have Cabutti. And Bussia is a kind of different kind of soil that emerged from the sea, after before was under the sea, submerged by the sea, millions of years before. So you have even there limestone, sandstone, calcareous, deep soil that makes usually very rich and long, powerful Barolo. I will say now about the using of the cask of the oak. It's very important. Now we work a lot on how to find the best match between wine, the single cru, and each and the oak, the matrimonial, the marriage. So we are now using from 2015. We start using just a large cask, and we remove the small cask. And we are working mostly with French cask and some Austrian cask and some Italian. And we see that each producer of the winery that produced the cask give a different characteristic to the wine. So the French one, when we use this Grenier, that are very well known, normally Conti, give more fruity to the wine. The Austrian is more spiciness. So now we are using that in particular for choosing the French one mostly for Canubi, and for Bussia the Austrian. I will now pass to the word to the wine. That is good for them. I will talk about this. In particular, I will start with the Barolo Ludo. Barolo Ludo, what does it mean? Ludo? Ludo is a word that means in Latin is the game of the vineyards. In the label, you have 4 different plots, the 4 plots that we have, that with the younger vines we produce this wine. So this is the Barolo Classico that so represent in the best way all the area coming from Barolo, even Verduno. Here you have Mobiliero and the Monforte. So it's a very representative Barolo. In this case, we are here a little bit less maturation time than for the Cru, for the Canubi and Bussia. It's a wine that are pretty open and enjoyable. It's a beautiful. I would say, Barolo, because the characteristic, the beautiful nose immediately give give a beautiful nose of rose even here, because of more freshness, and we are using a fermentation a little bit lower than the other to have more freshness in the nose and more immediate, more open in the beginning. And then, and so here we are using large cask and maturation of 20 days. For the 2 cru, starting from 3 cru, Costa Grimaldi, the first, Costa Grimaldi, the older one that we produced since 1954, the area we produce Barolo there. Costa Grimaldi comes later, before we just call Barolo. The Costa Grimaldi is, as I said, is more classic, very solid and nice, beautiful aroma. Even 17 is very forward, but is forward, but without, it's not burn. It's not because it will not, as you say, is a warm vintage. I don't. It's a warm vintage, but in a better way, because it's a wine that are immediately enjoyable, fresh in the nose, with a lot of layers, and beautiful finishing. Tennis are pretty smooth. Costa Grimaldi is I could say, more classic, more austere than the 2 Canubi and Bussia, but with a little bit more younger oak, because we are using with the younger oak we are using for this Costa Ribaldi, because usually have bigger tannins, and the younger oak give a little bit more sweetness to this wine, but always big cask. Moving to the Barolo Canubi, Canubi always have a beauty immediately, more layers, I think, in the nose, spectrum of aroma, very complex. You can find a lot of things inside. Spice, strawberry, you have fruity, you have rose, you have a lot of things inside. I love the Canubi. The nose is huge. In the mouth is always Canubi silky, smooth, and elegant, but with the tannins that are beautiful, tannins that are silky. Compared with the Bussia, that another kind of characteristic for sure, it's the nose is beautiful even for the Bussia. It's very open to be a Bussia. Usually Bussia needs more time. Bussia, it's an area where usually needs maybe 2-3 years more to develop. In 17, you have a brilliant nose in Bussia with spicy and fruit even here. The mouth is something different. It's much more deep. Fill your mouth completely, and you have a beautiful sensation of also salinity. So you have the finish is very salty for Bussia, even for Canubi. But this salty finish is lovely because make you enjoy and make the wine to drink again. So I wait for answer. Thank you very much for listening.
Oh, good. Well done, Matteo. Well done. Again, you know, I think a couple of things are important to say to help the people listening better understand, gain a better appreciation of the estate and its wines. The first thing, for those who aren't Italian and for those who don't know much about Italian history, again, this is something that Matteo can't say, but I can. You need to understand that the founder of this estate, Luigi Einaudi, is without question one of the single greatest historical figures in the history of Italy. He was, by all accounts, just a wonderful man. Clearly, I never met him. But the accounts, the historical accounts, put Einaudi right up there with Cavour and really some of the fathers of the Italian nation. I mean, to help you understand, we're talking for the Americans and the Canadians listening, we really are talking a level of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and John MacDonald for Canada. So really a figure of a magnitude that is really hard for me to broadcast. If you like history, besides wine, I really recommend that you read up on Luigi Einaudi, because really, you know, we live in a society that sometimes you just decide, you know what, I want to go live somewhere else, maybe Mars. But then there are people like Einaudi, and there's hope for the human race. So do read up on him, wonderful man. Now, going back to the wines, like Brunate, Canubi is one of the 5 most important vineyards of Barolo, and probably, if we really have to say it, it's the most important, most famous vineyard of all Barolo. As Matteo was saying, the first ever vineyard on a label in Italy is Canubi back in 1752. It wasn't even Barolo, it was just Canubi. That was how famous the site was. And Canubi has that one characteristic that Matteo alluded to, and very important. That is, Canubi is a sandy site, especially in the central portion, which is where Matteo has his vineyards, which is the original central, quote unquote, real Canubi. It really does have about 30% sand. So that means that the Canubi will be especially great in rainy years. So that's another thing, you know, I go back to the vintage charts. You know, you look this is a rainy year. Oh my God, it's a horrible year. Oh, I don't want to buy those wines. No, why? Canubi in a rainy year is fantastic. You're never going to get a better wine than Canubi in a rainy year because the thing just drains. The water just goes away. And for example, the part of Canubi that's closer to Barolo called Canubi Muscatel, there's a lot more clay there. So it really is a different soil. Not better, not worse. It's just different. And so Canubi really, wines of profound aromatic complexity, but with comparatively softer tannins compared to other Barolos, certainly compared to Busia, which, you know, Busia is an interesting thing. Again, if we talk about the expression of Barolo, Busia is huge, right? With the new MGAs, Busia is close to 299 hectares. Huh?
They see probably the portion the Maslaghetti too big for political reason.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
The best are Soprana and Sottana Busia.
Sure.
The area that goes close to Monforte, not the same country.
Is different. Is different. But you know, the interesting thing about Busia, and this is again for those who are listening to us and maybe, you know, don't have the chance to drink Barolo as often as everybody else, but in Busia, the tannin framework is so different from Canubi's. Both are perfumed wines because Nebbiolo has this amazing ability to deliver roses and violets. It's just a fantastic perfume. But when you taste the Canubi and the Busia, what will immediately strike you is the architectural framework of the Busia. It really is a massive wine compared to the Canubi. Now they're both Barolo, so we're not talking sissies here. I mean, these are heavyweight wines, but the Busia is really something else, and that's very typical of the wines of Monforte. I just want to mention one last thing. Costa Grimaldi is in the Terlo MGA, and it's one that, for example, if you take the high road from Novello to Lamora, it's a very nice vineyard. It's a very beautiful part of the Barolo denomination, and those vines are interesting because they're some of the oldest ones that were planted on the property. The interesting thing is, I remember reading, Matteo, tell me if I'm wrong, but originally you weren't making Barolo, and Luigi Einaudi actually went on record as saying that he got so tired at all the state dinners. For those who don't know, Luigi Einaudi was Italy's first president. He got so tired of people asking him if the Barolo they were drinking was his that he ended up buying a vineyard just to make them keep quiet.
It's true, because no, he started making Barolo with not his vineyards, and so at the end it was so imbarazzato. It was not so I have to buy something. So he started trying to buy and find that plot. It was a beautiful plot. Then he was very close to buy the same portion of Canubi that I bought in 1996. He was very close, he was doing the deal, but at the end, when the owner knows that he was the president under the acquisition, behind the acquisition, there was the president, increased the price. And it was better to buy it. It was better to buy in 1955 than now, but anyway. Of
course.
But now, this was a story.
Well, you're lucky to have bought it in '97 because it was affordable back then.
No, yes, it wasn't nothing compared with us.
Yeah, today Canubi is like, oh boy, crazy prices.
Yeah.
All right, so thank you, Matteo.